baby?
Madam, please. You just gave birth. You need to lie down.
My son was here. He was here. He was right here. Where is my baby? Somebody help me!
The scream echoed through the maternity ward before anyone realized what had happened. My baby! Amara cried, dragging herself out of the hospital bed despite the pain shooting through her body. Where is my baby? The young nurse tried to stop her. Madam, please. You just gave birth. You need to lie down. My son was here. Amara shouted, pointing at the empty bassinet beside her bed. He was right here. Within seconds, the once peaceful maternity floor descended into chaos. Nurses rushed from room to room, security guards sealed every exit, and frightened mothers clutched their newborns tightly against their chests. Amara barely noticed any of it. All she could see was the empty cot. Just an hour earlier, a nurse had placed her tiny baby boy in her arms. She had counted his tiny fingers, kissed his forehead, and whispered the name she and her husband had chosen months before. David. Now he was gone. Before we continue, if you love powerful African stories filled with shocking twists and unforgettable lessons, take a second to subscribe and turn on notifications. We share stories like this every week. Now, let's find out who took Amara's baby. Only 24 hours earlier, life had felt almost perfect. Amara Okeke sat in the passenger seat of her husband Chinedu's black SUV as they drove toward Grace Memorial Hospital.
I can't believe today is finally here.
I've waited 9 months. You've been counting days since the doctor confirmed it.
I've waited even longer than that.
He gently rested his hand on her stomach.
Our son is going to change everything. You'll see.
Amara believed him. When Chinedu had married her 2 years earlier, many people questioned why she would willingly become a second wife. But Chinedu had always insisted that his home would never be ruled by rivalry. There will be enough love for everyone, he often said. Amara wanted to believe that. Even Sarah, his first wife, had welcomed her with kindness, or so it had seemed. When they arrived at the hospital, Sarah was already waiting. She stood gracefully near the entrance in a cream-colored dress, holding a bouquet of fresh white lilies. My dear, she said warmly, embracing Amara with surprising tenderness.
My dear, today is your day.
Thank you.
You'll do wonderfully.
Sarah even insisted on carrying Amara's overnight bag while Chinedu completed the admission paperwork. To anyone watching, they looked like sisters. But as they walked toward the elevator, Sarah's smile disappeared for only a moment. She slipped her phone from her handbag. A single message flashed across the screen. Everything is ready. She read it once, then quietly deleted it. Labor lasted almost 12 exhausting hours. By evening, Amara's cries filled the delivery room. Push, the doctor encouraged. You can do this. Chinedu stood beside her, gripping her trembling hand. You've got this. One final push. Then, a baby's cry pierced the room. The doctor smiled. It's a healthy baby boy. Tears streamed down Amara's face as the tiny child was placed against her chest. He was beautiful. Tiny curls covered his head. His little fingers wrapped around hers with astonishing strength. My son, she whispered. Chinedu kissed Amara's forehead. Thank you. For a brief moment, the world felt complete. Outside the delivery room, Sarah sat alone in the waiting area. Relatives congratulated her. You finally have a son in the family. She forced herself to smile. Yes. Inside, however, something darker stirred. For nearly 10 years, she had prayed for this moment. 10 years. 3 miscarriages. Countless hospital visits. Silent tears shed in bathrooms where no one could hear. She had imagined herself holding Chinedu's first child. Instead, that blessing belonged to another woman. Her nails dug into her palm until they left faint crescent marks. She stood, walked into the hospital chapel, closed the door, and whispered through clenched teeth, "Why her?" Late that night, Amara drifted in and out of sleep. The medication made everything feel distant. A nurse smiled. Would you like us to take the baby to the nursery for a quick checkup? We'll bring him back shortly. Amara kissed her son's forehead. Don't keep him away for long. We won't. The nurse wheeled the bassinet away. It was the last time Amara saw her child. An hour later, she woke. The room was strangely quiet. She smiled weakly. My baby? No answer. She looked toward the bassinet. Empty. She frowned. Perhaps the nurses were still examining him. She pressed the call button. Nothing. Minutes passed. A different nurse entered. Good evening, madam. How are you feeling? My baby, she said. The nurse smiled politely. Yes, bring him to me. The smile disappeared. What baby? Amara stared at her and said, My son. The nurse looked confused. I thought he was already here. Cold fear spread through Amara's chest. She threw aside the blanket despite the pain from childbirth. No. She looked under the blanket. Around the room. Into the bathroom. Nothing. No. She shouted. Her breathing became shallow. No. She stumbled into the hallway, ignoring the protests behind her. My baby. People turned. Nurses rushed toward her. My son is missing. The corridor erupted into panic. A doctor ordered security to lock every exit. Staff began searching every floor. Chinita came running from the pharmacy downstairs. What happened? Amara grabbed his shirt. They've taken him. What? He shouted. Our son, she said. I only slept for 15 minutes. She broke down sobbing. They took him. Chinita looked from Amara to the terrified nurses. Find my son. At the far end of the corridor. Sarah slowly approached. She wrapped an arm around Amara. It's going to be all right. Amara pushed her away. You were here. Sarah blinked. What? You were here all evening, Amara said. I was praying in the chapel. My baby is gone, Amara said. Sarah's expression filled with concern. Then she turned toward Chinidu and lowered her voice. The doctor warned us the medication might affect her memory. Chinita looked confused. What are you saying? I'm only saying. She sighed sadly. Let's not jump to conclusions until the doctors explain everything. Amara froze. She looked into her husband's eyes. For one terrifying second, she sought out, not belief, doubt. And somewhere beyond the hospital walls, a black SUV disappeared into the night. Inside, a newborn baby's soft cries faded beneath the sound of the engine. The hospital searched until dawn. Every ward, every operating theater, every storage room. Security officers questioned cleaners, nurses, visitors, and even patients' relatives. Police officers arrived before sunrise and sealed the maternity wing. By noon, there was still no sign of baby David. The CCTV cameras covering the nursery had mysteriously stopped recording for exactly 23 minutes. It was as though someone had planned every second. Amara sat wrapped in a blanket, her face pale from blood loss and exhaustion. Inspector Adebayo pulled up a chair. I know this is difficult, Mrs. Okeke, but I need you to tell me everything you remember. I remember a nurse taking my son for a checkup. Amara responded. What did she look like? Amara closed her eyes. She wore the same uniform as the others, but she frowned. Something was different. What? I couldn't see her name tag. The inspector scribbled a note. Anything else? I heard voices before I woke up. What were they saying? I don't know. She shook her head in frustration. The medicine made everything blurry. Before the inspector could ask another question, Sarah stepped into the room carrying a flask of soup. Inspector, she said politely, the doctors think Amara needs to rest. Adebayo nodded and stood. We'll continue later. As he reached the door, he noticed Sarah gently squeeze Amara's shoulder. To anyone else, it looked comforting. To him, something about it felt rehearsed. Outside the room, Chinita leaned against the wall. His eyes were red from crying. I'll spend everything I have to find my son, he said. We will do everything possible, Adebayo replied. Then he paused. Tell me honestly, did anyone know your wife would deliver yesterday? Only family, he said. How about your first wife? Mr. Adebayo asked. Chinita looked surprised. Sarah. Yes. Of course. She brought us here herself. Adebayo nodded slowly. I'm asking everyone the same questions. Chinidu folded his arms. Inspector, are you suggesting my wife had something to do with this? No. I'm suggesting I investigate everyone. That evening, television stations began reporting the kidnapping. Newborn vanishes from private hospital. Social media exploded with outrage. Parents demanded answers. The hospital's reputation collapsed overnight. But while the public searched for someone to blame, a different story quietly spread through the Okeke family. Poor Amara, one aunt whispered. The trauma has affected her. I heard she keeps insisting someone stole the baby. Another relative sighed. Grief can do terrible things. Amara overheard every word. Each sentence felt like another door closing. 3 days later, the police had no leads. No ransom call. No witnesses. Nothing. Chinita returned home carrying the tiny blue blanket they had bought months earlier. The nursery was exactly as they had left it. A crib stood beside the window. Tiny clothes hung neatly inside the wardrobe. A stuffed elephant rested in the rocking chair. Chinita picked it up, then quietly sat on the floor. For the first time in years, he cried. Amara watched from the doorway. She wanted to comfort him. Instead, she whispered, "They're still out there." He looked up. Who? The people who took our son. His shoulders slumped. The police have searched everywhere. They haven't searched enough, Amara said. She walked toward him. I know what I saw. You were under heavy medication, he said. Her face fell. You don't believe me either. I believe you're hurting. That's not what I asked. Silence followed. That silence answered everything. Days became weeks. Weeks became months. Life outside continued. Inside the Okeke home, time stopped. If your heart is breaking for Amara right now, let us know in the comments. Do you think Chinita should have believed his wife from the very beginning, or would you have doubted her too? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Now, what happened next shocked everyone. Amara covered the walls of her room with newspaper clippings, hospital maps, names of nurses, and handwritten notes. Every tiny detail mattered. She replayed that night in her mind hundreds of times. There had been a perfume. A sweet floral scent. Not hospital disinfectant. Perfume. Someone had stood beside her bed. Someone who didn't belong. Meanwhile, Sarah became everything everyone admired. She cooked for Amara, prayed with her, accompanied her to counseling sessions. Whenever visitors came, she spoke softly. We're trusting God. People praised her kindness. If not for Sarah, relatives often said, this family would have fallen apart. Every compliment tightened the knot inside her chest. Because every night, she locked herself in her bedroom, opened a hidden drawer, removed an old burner phone, and waited. Finally, it vibrated. One message. The child is safe. Stop contacting us. Her hands trembled. She immediately deleted it, then burned the SIM card in a metal ashtray. She watched the plastic melt into black ash. No more mistakes, she whispered. Across the city, Inspector Adebayo refused to close the case. His colleagues urged him to move on. There are no leads. The trail is cold. The baby's probably gone. Adebayo ignored them. Instead, he returned to Grace Memorial Hospital. He requested every staff roster from the week of the kidnapping. One name caught his attention. Grace Akanum, a temporary nurse. Hired for only 2 days. No permanent address. No valid employment history. By the time police tried to locate her, she had disappeared. Adebayo leaned back in his chair. This wasn't random, he murmured. This was planned. That same evening, Amara returned home after visiting a prayer meeting. As she unlocked the front door, she noticed a small brown envelope lying on the welcome mat. No stamp. No address. No name. Her heart raced. Inside, she found a tiny blue hospital bracelet. She recognized it instantly. It was David's. Her knees buckled. Tears blurred her vision. On the back of the bracelet, written in faded ink, were 3 words. Don't give up. Amara clutched the bracelet to her chest. For the first time in months. She didn't cry because she was grieving. She cried because, somewhere deep inside, hope had returned. The bracelet became the first real proof that Amara had not imagined everything. She drove straight to Inspector Adebayo's office without even changing out of her house clothes. When she placed the tiny blue hospital bracelet on his desk, the veteran detective stared at it for several seconds. "Where did you get this?" "It was left at my front door." "No one saw who dropped it off?" She shook her head. "My security camera stopped working last night." Adebayo's expression hardened. "Again? What do you mean?" "The hospital cameras failed the night your baby disappeared." He carefully picked up the bracelet with a pair of gloves. "This wasn't sent to frighten you." "What was it sent to do?" He looked into her eyes. "It was sent to tell you your son is alive." Amara burst into tears. For the first time in nearly 4 years, someone other than herself believed those words. The bracelet was sent to the forensic laboratory. 3 days later, Adebayo received the report. There were traces of a rare disinfectant commonly used, not in hospitals, but in private neonatal clinics. He spread a city map across his desk. Only 6 clinics in the entire state used that brand. "We start with these," he said. While the investigation quietly gathered momentum, life inside the Okeke mansion became increasingly tense. Chinedu tried to celebrate his 44th birthday. The dining table overflowed with expensive food. Business partners laughed. Family members exchanged gifts. Only Amara remained silent. She stared at the empty chair that had been prepared years ago for the little boy who should have been sitting there by now. Sarah noticed. She forced a smile. "Sister Amara, won't you join us?" Amara looked directly at her. "Do you ever think about him?" The room fell silent. Sarah's smile froze. "Every day." "No." Amara's voice was calm. "I mean, do you ever wonder where he sleeps? Whether he cries at night? Whether he knows his mother's face?" A nervous cough escaped one of the guests. Chinedu quickly stood. "That's enough." Amara rose from her chair. "No, it isn't enough." She looked at everyone around the table. "You've all buried my son while I'm still searching for him." Then she quietly walked away. The silence she left behind felt heavier than any argument. That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. She kept hearing Amara's words. "Whether he knows his mother's face." She walked into her dressing room. Hidden behind several designer handbags was a small locked safe. Inside were only 3 things: a passport, several bundles of cash, and an old photograph. It showed a newborn baby wrapped in a blue blanket. She stared at it. Tears gathered in her eyes. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't think it would become this." But another voice inside her answered. "You wanted her to suffer." She slammed the safe shut. The next morning, Inspector Adebayo visited the first private clinic. Nothing. The second. Nothing. At the 3rd clinic, an elderly cleaner recognized the bracelet immediately. "We stopped using those 4 years ago." Adebayo's heartbeat quickened. "Who supplied them?" The woman frowned. "I don't know, but there was a nurse who came often." "What was her name?" "I can't remember." "Think." People called her Grace. Grace. The temporary nurse from Grace Memorial Hospital. Adebayo immediately requested her file again. This time he noticed something everyone had overlooked. The address she provided belonged to an abandoned building. She had never existed. Grace Akanum was a fake identity. Elsewhere, Sarah received an unexpected visitor at her fashion boutique. A middle-aged man wearing sunglasses entered quietly. She recognized him immediately. Her face drained of color. "You shouldn't be here. We have a problem. I told you never to contact me. The detective is getting close." She swallowed. "How close?" "He knows about Grace." Her knees weakened. "That's impossible. He also knows about the clinics." Sarah grabbed his arm. "I paid you to make sure everything disappeared." "It almost did," he said. "What do you mean almost?" The man leaned closer. "Someone kept records." Sarah's heart nearly stopped. "What records?" "I don't know. But if the police find them." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. That evening, Inspector Adebayo received an anonymous phone call. "I know who sold the baby." The voice was distorted. "Who is this?" I can't tell you. Then tell me where to find you. Warehouse 17. The person said. When? Midnight. The line went dead. Against protocol, Adebayo went. 2 undercover officers followed from a distance. The abandoned warehouse stood in darkness near the old docks. Inside, boxes were scattered everywhere. No one. Then, a baby's toy rolled slowly across the concrete floor. Adebayo stopped walking. Something felt wrong. Too quiet. Suddenly, gunshots exploded from the upper level. The officers dove for cover. Adebayo fired back. Footsteps thundered through the building as masked men escaped through the rear exit. Within minutes, silence returned. The informant was gone. But on the dusty floor lay a small black notebook. Adebayo opened it. Inside were dozens of handwritten names, dates, payments, hospitals, children. His blood ran cold. This wasn't one kidnapping. It was an entire baby trafficking network. Then he reached the final page. One name had been written differently from all the others. Not a code. Not initials. A full name. Sarah Okeke. Adebayo stared at it in disbelief. At that very moment, miles away, Sarah stood by the window of her bedroom. She sensed, for the first time in 4 years, that the walls she had built around her secret were beginning to crack. And she knew one thing with terrifying certainty. If the truth came out, she would lose everything. Inspector Adebayo didn't sleep that night. The black notebook lay open on his desk. Each page documented another stolen child, another grieving family, another payment. By sunrise, detectives from the Anti-Human Trafficking Unit had verified several names in the notebook. 3 matched unsolved infant abduction cases from different hospitals over the last 6 years. This wasn't an isolated crime. It was a business. And one name appeared again and again, not as a trafficker, but as a client who had requested a specific child. Sarah Okeke. A warrant was issued before noon. When officers arrived at the Okeke mansion, Chinedu opened the door himself. "Inspector," he asked in surprise. "Has something happened?" Adebayo removed his cap. "We need to speak to everyone in the house." Minutes later, Amara, Sarah, Chinedu, and several relatives sat in the living room. The atmosphere was heavy. Adebayo placed the black notebook on the coffee table. "This investigation has uncovered a baby trafficking network responsible for multiple kidnappings." Gasps filled the room. He slowly turned the notebook around. "One of the names in these records belongs to someone in this house." Sarah folded her hands tightly in her lap. "Who?" Adebayo looked directly at her. "You." The room froze. Chinedu laughed nervously. "There must be some mistake." "I wish there were." Adebayo slid several photographs across the table. The first showed CCTV footage from a hotel lobby taken 4 years earlier. Though grainy, the woman's face was unmistakable. Sarah. The second photograph showed her meeting the same middleman outside her boutique. The third showed financial transfers from an account secretly linked to her. Chinedu stared at the evidence in disbelief. "No." He looked at his first wife. "Tell them this isn't true." Sarah remained silent. "Sarah." Still nothing. "Say something." For several agonizing seconds, the only sound in the room was the ticking of the grandfather clock. Finally, Sarah looked at Amara. Tears rolled slowly down her cheeks. "I never wanted him dead." Amara's face drained of color. "You." Her voice cracked. "You did it." Sarah nodded once. "I only wanted." She struggled to breathe. "I wanted you to feel what I felt." "What are you talking about?" "I buried 3 babies." She broke down. "I held 3 tiny coffins." Her entire body shook. "Every prayer I prayed seemed to go unanswered. Then you came into the house, and within 2 years you gave Chinedu the son I could never give him." She buried her face in her hands. "I hated myself for being jealous." She looked back at Amara. "But I hated you even more." Amara couldn't speak. The woman she had called sister. The woman who had prayed beside her. The woman who had wiped her tears. Had stolen her child. Chinedu stumbled backward until he hit the wall. "You let me comfort you." His voice trembled. "You watched me mourn my own son." Sarah whispered. I thought I'd forget. You watched your co-wife lose her mind. Chinita shouted. You watched her beg me to believe her. He turned to Amara. His eyes filled with shame. You kept telling me the truth. Amara didn't answer. I failed you. Still, she remained silent. He sank to his knees. I wasn't just a husband who made a mistake. His voice broke. I was a husband who chose the easier lie. Hours later, police arrested Sarah. As officers led her toward the patrol vehicle, she stopped. Amara. She called out. Amara looked at her without emotion. I don't expect forgiveness. You shouldn't. I only want you to know. She looked down. I never stopped wondering whether he was happy. Amara's reply was quiet but firm. You stole 4 years that can never be returned. Sarah lowered her head and entered the police vehicle. The door closed behind her. 3 weeks later, Inspector Adebayo called Amara with news she had waited years to hear. We found him. Her heart nearly stopped. Where? A family in Accra. They're part of the trafficking network? No. They believed they had completed a legal international adoption. They've loved him as their own ever since. Amara cried. Not from anger. From relief. Her son had been loved. The family court arranged the first meeting. Amara stood outside the counseling room, unable to steady her hands. The door opened. A little boy stepped inside. He was 4 years old. He had Chinita's eyes, Amara's smile, and the tiny birthmark behind his left ear that she had kissed the day he was born. The boy looked up curiously. The counselor smiled gently. David. The little boy walked closer. This is someone very special. He looked at Amara. Do I know you? Tears streamed freely down her face. She knelt until they were eye level. No. She smiled through the tears. But I've known you. She touched his cheek. Every day of your life. The little boy hesitated. Then, as children sometimes do, he wrapped his small arms around her neck without fully understanding why. Amara held him as though she were trying to make up for every missed birthday, every bedtime story, every hug that had been stolen. Neither of them spoke. They didn't have to. The months that followed were not easy. The court ruled that David would gradually transition into the care of his biological parents, with the adoptive couple remaining part of his life because they had acted in good faith and had genuinely loved and cared for him. Amara supported that decision. She refused to let another family be broken by lies. Chinita tried every day to rebuild the trust he had shattered. He apologized often. But Amara made one thing clear. Forgiveness isn't something you ask for once. She looked him in the eye. It's something you earn. A year later, the nursery that had remained untouched for 4 years was finally filled with laughter. David raced toy cars across the floor while Amara watched from the doorway. The room no longer felt haunted. It felt alive. Inspector Adebayo visited one last time. The trafficking network has been dismantled, he said. Because you refused to stop searching. Amara smiled. I wasn't brave. You were, he said. I was just a mother. Adebayo smiled. Sometimes. He looked at David. That's the bravest person in the world, he said, pointing at Amara. As the evening sun poured through the nursery window, Amara watched her son laugh, a sound she had dreamed of hearing for years. She knew that justice had punished the guilty, but justice alone could never return the birthdays, first words, and precious moments that had been stolen. Some losses could never truly be recovered. Yet love had endured where hatred had failed. And perhaps that was the greatest victory of all. Because in the end, jealousy stole a child, but it could not destroy a mother's love. Thank you for watching this powerful African story. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who believes that truth always finds its way to the light. Until next time, keep believing in justice, hope, and the power of a mother's love. If you were Amara, would you ever forgive a husband who doubted you when you needed him most?